following information is presented for discussion and educational purposes only and is not intended or provided as treatment information for any specific person or behavior. If you or a loved one is having behavioral difficulties, you are encouraged to seek professional consultation as soon as possible. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 11 of Ask the Behavior Doctors. My name is Dr. Jacob Boney, and I'm the owner and clinical director of Scottsdale Pediatric Behavioral Services. We're here today in sunny Scottsdale, Arizona, answering your questions. Parents, again, I want to remind you, send those questions to us at info@scottsdalepbs.com. Send any kind of questions you're wondering about, anything that has to do with behavioral science, parenting, getting good behaviors, teaching things to your children, anything at all in that area. So today's question has to do with defiance and inappropriate foul language. So I've been getting a lot of questions recently from parents about, Dr. Jake, what do I do when my kid is just incredibly defiant and disrespectful and uses just awful language, calls me names, threatens me, is just extremely defiant? What should I do in that moment? So the sad thing is that this behavior can start really young. I've had children as young as 2 who engage in extremely foul language use and who are beyond defiant. So this behavior can start very young. Many of my patients, though, at this age who are doing it typically are late childhood, early preteen, into obviously adolescence. So I wanted to give parents some ideas of some things to do and some things that I found professionally that work really well for a lot of my patients here. So number one thing, and this is simple, but a lot more critical than parents realize, is you have to model good behavior as the parent. I will tell you this, in at least 60 to 70% of the homes that I see with extreme defiance or extreme foul language use, that behavior is typically modeled between parents and children. So parents will often get very upset, will cuss at their children. Parents will curse at each other. Parents will have strong arguments with their children. So my point is that behavior, unfortunately, is modeled inappropriately for those children, especially from a young age. So I will tell you this, parents, the number one thing I recommend doing is decreasing your use of that as much as possible, getting rid of the foul language, getting rid of the tense arguing, getting rid of extreme defiant confrontations in your home. Behavior can get emotional sometimes, obviously. It can become very overwhelming. However, the best way to set the tone, set the foundation for a home that has more respect, that has more consideration of others, that has more just appropriate interaction, is to model that. The second thing I want parents to do is I want you to figure out the function of that behavior. So some kids can curse and become extremely defiant for typically a couple reasons. So we know that the behavior is socially mediated, meaning you typically need another person to do the behavior with. Most kids aren't going to become extremely defiant, aren't going to start cussing up a storm unless they have someone else who's either talking to them or triggering them or someone who they're trying to communicate with. So we know that it's socially mediated, but what we don't know is whether that's like socially mediated positive for attention, or we don't know whether it's socially mediated negative reinforcement for escape. So some kids will cuss and fight and argue just to kind of get that sense of control or get that sense of feeling like equal or feeling powerful with their parents. So that's kind of a tension maintained. However, the opposite's true though too. Some kids will just cuss and become extremely defiant because it makes parents or siblings go away and give them space. So the reason to figure out the function of this is the function is going to change how we treat it. Obviously, if your child cusses and becomes defiant to escape from you, and if you just leave them alone every time and ignore the behavior, well, then you're going to make that behavior work really well. We don't want that behavior to work really well. We want a more appropriate behavior to work really well. So parents, you have to ask yourself, what does my child consistently get after doing this behavior? If they consistently get a lot of attention, a lot of arguing, a lot of interaction from other people, then you probably have some support that it's more attention maintained. However, if they constantly get left alone or they constantly get to do their own thing after having these episodes of defiance or extreme, foul language use, then we're going to know that it's more escape maintained. The ideas I'm going to give you will address both, but it is important to delineate which one of those functions it is. All right, so rule number 3, I want you to give the attention or give the behavior as little attention as possible. I had a supervisor who used to love to tell me this. There's some things you can't make better, but you can make a whole lot worse. And that's kind of the rule here. When your kid gets in that mode, when they're extremely defiant, using foul language, cussing up a storm, that's something that you can't always make better immediately. The kid may be in a bad mood. The kid may be just trying to unload on you. That kid may have been holding that in for a long time. And that may be a long learned history of pattern of behavior with you as a parent. So this is my point. In that moment, you can't always make that behavior better, but you can certainly probably make it worse. And the way to make it worse is to feed into it, is to give that child that argument. That's the worst thing to do in that moment, is to argue, is to try and engage that child when they're acting like that. You're setting the tone. You're basically sending the message that this is an appropriate way to engage with mom and dad, to yell, scream, and cuss at me. That's not the message we want to send. We want to send the message that that is never appropriate. So number 1 rule is give it as minimal attention as possible. Now, I'm not saying ignore your child. What I am saying is ignore that exact behavior, okay? Rule number, let's see here, rule number 4, prompt the words you want your child to use. So if your child says something inappropriate, I want you to ignore that inappropriate word or inappropriate phrase as much as possible, and then prompt them exactly what you want to say. Hey, if you want a break or if you want something from me, all you got to do is say, Dad, can I have some? Or Dad, can you help me please? Or Mom, can you please give me some space? You want to model that appropriate term for your child to use. In reality, a lot of kids may not know what to say, and they may not know know what you expect them to say. So this is critical, parents. You have to set that tone. You have to set that bar. You have to tell them exactly and model exactly what you expect them to say. And sometimes literally just modeling that in the moment and saying, as soon as you say this, I'll talk to you. As soon as you can ask me appropriately. But doing that model makes it more likely that they're probably going to copy and emulate what you say, especially if that's the only thing you're willing to give attention or the only thing you're willing to give escape. So let me give you an opposite thing. Let's say you go to your child's room and your child says, you know what, Mom, Dad, screw off. I don't want to talk to you right now. Get out of here right now. You could say, whoa, if you want me to leave, all you have to say is, Mom, can you please leave? As soon as you say that, I'll leave. What you're doing is you're saying that this is the only way I'll give you what you want, me leaving, is by getting what I want first, which is you asking appropriately. Remember, for your child to get what they want consistently in your home, they need to do the behaviors that you expect. So you have to make those behaviors very specific, very explicit. Model the exact thing you want your child to say instead of that inappropriate thing. Number 5, if your child refuses to use an appropriate request or continues to be defiant or curse or threaten you, I want you to quickly implement what's called a performance-based consequence. Now, I want to talk really quickly about this concept of performance-based versus time-based. Many parents, as a classic example, will encounter a defiant child, a child who's just cussing up a storm, doing whatever, and they'll say, if you keep doing this, I'm going to take your stuff or I'm going to take away this privilege for this amount of time. And the kid says, well, I don't care, do it, go ahead. What happens? The parent does it. What happens then? The kid gets even more mad, more pissed off, and then escalates their behavior. What does the parent do in reaction? Fine, I'm going to take it twice as long. I'm going to take it for 2 months instead of 1 month. I'm going to take it for 3 months. That's all time-based punishment, or time-based consequences. The reason this is bad, the reason this is awful, 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 is several reasons. Is number 1, when you take what your child's most motivated to earn based on time, you guarantee that for that time, you will take away your most powerful tool to get your child's best behavior. You have guaranteed to decrease your child's motivation to give you the behavior you want for that amount of time, okay? Number 2, no matter how good a behavior they engage in from that time on, so let's say you enforce some kind of consequence for 2 months, they could give you 2 months of great behavior. You're missing all that opportunity to reward, reinforce, and shape great behavior. Okay? And the third reason this is awful is that guess what? It becomes more work for the parent to enforce the consequence than it does for the child to actually suffer the consequence. So parents will tell me, oh, Jake, man, I screwed up big time. I took my kid's phone for 3 months and man, I don't have any tools to motivate my kid anymore. And man, their behavior's just gotten so much worse. And man, things have gotten awful at home and I don't know what to do. I don't want to look like a fool and give it back because I said I was going to take it for 3 months, but now I have no tool to shape my kid's behavior and they're totally unmotivated. They've got the screw-its and they're not going to work hard at all anymore. So what I want parents to do instead of time-based punishments is I want them to go to what's called performance-based consequences. So if your child uses foul language, is incredibly defiant and disrespectful, what you could do is then you could temporarily block access, deny access, or not give access for a specified amount of time until your child does the behavior you want. So let's say, for example, you typically allow computer time in the evening. You can say, okay, you know what, man? You just had a major episode. I really need you to be more respectful and use more appropriate words with me. I cannot talk to you when you cuss at me like that and when you yell. I will talk to you as soon as you're calm. So when you can be calm for at least a continuous hour with me and talk to me respectfully, then that's when I'll give you your phone, or then that's when I'll give you your computer time or whatever you want your child to earn. What this does is this totally switches the mindset from you being the taker and the enforcer to your child being the earner of the thing that they want in that moment. So remember, what you're doing is you're shaping and rewarding actual behavioral performance in that moment. It's not time-based, it's performance-based. So meaning, as soon as your child makes the good choice to engage in that appropriate behavior for the amount of time that you specified, then that's when the child will get exactly what they want. So let's say they want this special toy. Let's say they want to watch a movie. Let's say they want to spend time with mom and dad. As soon as they give you that continuous hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. So the rule of thumb is the younger the child, the smaller the bar should be set. So if it's a 2 or 3 year old child, maybe set that bar at 10, 15 minutes at first. And then also the rule of thumb as repeated offenses go, we might need to up that bar to make sure that the child is engaging in that behavior for longer and longer periods of time. But again, start small, work your way up. That's always the way to do it in behavior. So parents, I want you to get out of this mindset of time-based punishments. Don't ever take away things based on time. Always, always give your child a chance to earn what they want by giving you what you want. Don't ever take your tools away. Don't ever implement time-based consequences. Do performance-based. This is my point. I tell parents this all the time. You're telling me if Johnny's willing, Johnny can't even behave well for an hour. If he's willing to give us 2 days of great behavior, that you're not willing to let him earn that privilege back. And again, parents, think about it as practice opportunities. You gave Johnny 2 whole days of practice opportunities, tons of time, tons of practice to get that skill down more fluently, more better than he had it. And he engaged in that great behavior. He earned exactly what he wanted. And then you linked good behavior with good consequence. The biggest reason this is important is that it makes that relationship less aversive between parent and child. It makes you less of the taker and makes your child more of the earner. Your child should be constantly in the mode of earning what they want by giving you what you want. It has to go in that order. Remember, parents, you are the giver of good things. You are the provider. You are looking for opportunities and things to shape and reinforce, and your child should constantly be in that mode of earning things they want. Rule number 6, make sure that access to highly preferred items or privileges is tightly controlled by you. You as the parent have to be that giver of good things. Things must go through you. I have been in homes with 2, 3, and 4-year-old boys, or kids, boys and girls, and I'll say, parents, I see all these toys in Johnny's room, and my goodness, looks like a Toy Story in here, and he's got open access to everything. Why does he have open access to everything? And they say, well, those are his toys, or those are her toys, or those are her things. I can't take them away. And I'll look at parents and I'll say, well, did they get a paycheck and earn all that stuff? Did they they go out and buy it all? Well, where did that concept of his and hers come from? No, parents, that you have to get out of that mindset. This is what I'll tell you, is that if your child constantly has access to everything they want for free, number one, those things aren't going to be as valuable as you want them to be. Number two, the things that you do want to be valuable are going to be diluted by the things that they constantly have free access to. Okay? You need to make sure that everything your child holds valuable, that access to that goes through you consistently. It is not appropriate for your child to have their own toys that they can then go access and be distracted by when you try and remove something that's more powerful or more of an incentive. That's not how it works, parents. You use toys and items and things to shape and get great behavior. Those are privileges. Those are not rights. Your child does not have the right to every single toy in the toy store. Your child doesn't have a right to their Xbox. Your child doesn't have a right to those are privileges. And parents, you've got to treat them like privileges. You have to be the giver of access to those privileges. So, parents, one of the biggest mistakes I see is that this is not planned strategically enough. So parents, anytime you give your child an electronic device, an iPad, a phone, any kind of thing, you need to figure out how to restrict access to that with a code, a lock code, any kind of software. I mean, parents, go on Google and type in parent supervision software for electronic devices. You will find 1,000 different solutions. At this practice, with all of my employees, I have an iPad management system. Every single one of my employees has an iPad. I have an iPad management system where I can lock down every part and function of that iPad just from a press of a button digitally with a Wi-Fi signal. Parents, you can restrict access to all of these electronic devices if you're strategic enough about it. If you don't know how to do it, I would recommend consulting some kind of professional. You can go to, the Geek Squad at Best Buy. There's all kinds of people that would be willing to help you with these kind of monitoring types of devices. Or, again, I don't want you to think about it as restriction. It's access giving. How can I lock access and make sure to strategically give that access on a privilege or time basis, okay? So parents, you have to be the controller. You have to be the giver of good things. I want you to minimize the need to take. Parents, if you're constantly in the mode of taking things, then what that tells me is that your child has too much access to things, okay? Remember, everything your child has, everything they hold valuable should be considered that privilege, not that right. And parents, you should be the giver of that thing. If you're constantly in that mode of taking things, then what that tells me is that you're not strategically upfront planning of how to give those things more appropriately. So parents, my advice is this, especially for little kids, older kids, they can have some toys in their room, but Xbox, all of the video games, everything that's really super valuable to your kids should be either in a common area, in a family area, or you should make clear that that's something your child has to earn, okay? Even if you do allow them to have access to that in their room. This whole concept of them owning it and you not being able to take it, anything that prevents them or would take their focus or time from doing what you want them to do is something you should control, okay? Period, parents. So I want you to get control over those things, and I want you to, like I said, give that access consistently to your child. And the way you give that access is by that child doing the behaviors you want. Obviously, a big behavior we want here is we want respectful language. We want respectful interactions with parents. We want appropriate words. We want calm, appropriate interactions. Rule number 7, appraise appropriate language and compliance with directions. Make a big deal out of it. Notice it. Make sure they know it's important. Make it apparent that you are observing them doing these good behaviors and that you appreciate and value those types of behaviors. If you don't praise it, if you don't make it a big deal, they're not going to think it's a big deal either. Rule number 8, and this is my most important rule. You need to completely alter the ratio of positive and negative interactions. And when I say this, when I go into homes that are just toxic, things are going awful, everything is bad, the ratio is almost 4 or 5 to 1 of negative to positive. So no joke, if I have 100 interactions that I observe with parents and children, at least 80% of those interactions are negative. This equation has to be totally switched. The equation should be at least 3 to 1, maybe 4 to 1, positive to negative. That means, parents, that the amount of times you interact with your children, at least 60 to 70% of those interactions need to be about something enjoyable, something positive, a shared interest, or at least something neutral. Okay? So parents, you have to put this equation into balance. If it's not into balance, you're never going to consistently get the quality of interaction with your child that you want. So I'm telling you, you have to think about this as a math equation. This is where hiring a professional would be really helpful. I go to people's homes and I literally, like a nerd on my little data digital collectors, I collect data on every single interaction, positive or negative. I count the numbers, I calculate the percentage. And like I said, you're looking for 60 to 70% minimum, parents, to be positive. So the way you do this, number one, set fewer rules. The most punitive parents I ever seen, they got way too many rules, way too many. The rule of thumb is your child has to be able to quickly repeat the rules. No more than 3 to 5, especially in a home with lots of defiance and non-compliance. You have to make simpler rules, 3 to 5 rules. And I mean, these rules should be simple. Keep your hands to yourself, follow directions, do your homework every day. I mean, something as simple as that. Be respectful to each other. You have to set simple rules. Number 2, stop prompting and nagging so much. Parents, if you're constantly riding your child's back about what they didn't do, all the mistakes they did, things they didn't pick up, if you're constantly doing that, you're gonna push that equation of negative to positive, you're gonna push it out of whack. You're gonna make all of those interactions negative. The kid's gonna spend all of their time trying to avoid you. They're gonna see no value in interaction with you. If you're constantly focusing on the negative, kids are too smart to want to be around that. So parents, you've got to drop the nagging. You've got to drop that prompting. Never prompt a behavior more than 5 times, ever. I say preferably no more than 3. There's this concept called 3-step prompting, right? You ask, you show, you do, okay? Basically, it means by that 3rd prompt, you're physically forcing or physically making your child do the behavior. Parents, if you have a large child who's kind of hard to physically prompt, that makes sense not to do 3-step prompting. But by that 5th prompt, you need to enforce a consequence. This is what I tell parents. Don't ever prompt what you can't make your child do or enforce a consequence for doing. So for example, no long distance prompting. If you're 50 feet away from your child, don't ever prompt them from 50 feet away. Why? Because you can't do those 2 rules. You can't make them or enforce an immediate consequence for not doing the behavior. So no long distance prompting. But parents, you got to ask yourself, if your child's across the room, if your child's doing something, am I willing to make them or enforce an immediate consequence for them not doing this behavior? If the answer to either of those questions is no, do not prompt it. So again, we're trying to put that equation of positive to negative at that 60 to 70%. Parents, remember, prompt less, nag less, say less. Increase positive communications as much as possible. Start talking to your kids about things they enjoy, about their interests. Start talking about movies, music. If you don't know what your child's interested in, that's a big red flag that you probably need to spend more time with your kid. When in doubt, just be quiet and listen. It's a lot easier to talk to parents when they listen, when they're quiet and they're receptive and they don't add that negative opinion in or don't add some kind of pessimistic perspective in. Be quiet and listen. And like I said, those things are going to help put that equation back into balance. And this is what I tell parents. When things continue to just go negative, the rule of thumb is just talk less, nag less, make the rules simpler, and spend time with your child doing something shared. Even if you're not talking. The worst thing to do, by the way, is to ignore each other, because you're never going to put that equation back into balance by ignoring each other. You're just going to keep it out of balance. With children that are extremely defiant or non-compliant, or children with extreme disrespect, extreme cursing behaviors, I always recommend what's called a day-by-day system. This is what I mean, is consequences or rules should never be enforced, and privileges should never be given for more than a day at a time. And the reason I like this day-by-day system is that it makes every day a new day. The kids in the worst situations, the kids with the worst attitudes I've seen, they get the screw-its really quickly. So think about it. If parents have been in that mode where they just take, they're grounded for like 3 months, they have none of their privileges, they have no reason to give you great behavior, those kids are going to get the screw-its really quickly. And when I say the screw-its, that just means screw it. The world's against me. I can't win. Nothing I do matters. So you know what? I'm miserable, and I'm going to make everybody else miserable, just like me. I meet lots of kids who get the screw-its really quickly. But doing this day-by-day system switches that mindset, because every day is a new opportunity to earn exactly what they want, access to that, by doing those good behaviors that parents are setting that bar for. Remember, you have your simple 3 to 5 rules. The kid does those 3 to 5 rules. They get exactly the things they want at the end of that day. At the end of that day, though, the next day, the bar is reset. They have to redo those good behaviors to get access. So let's say they have one bad day. Well, the nice thing is that very next day, the rules reset. They have a chance to re-earn exactly what they wanted. Again, parents, I would recommend that if your child gets to this point where you feel like you have to do a day-by-day system, I would highly recommend seeking the consultation of a professional just so that they can help intervene and make sure that things are not going to get hostile or aggressive, or that safety is not going to be put at risk. So, parents, I want to thank you for joining us again today, watching our videos. That brings us to the end of today. I want you to continue to please submit your questions to us at info@scottsdalepbs.com. We want to thank our photographer, Mr. Philip Carnevale of philipcarnevalephotography.com. We want to thank you again for submitting those questions and joining us here at Scottsdale Pediatric Behavioral Services and Ask the Behavior Doctors.